Welcome, Sudhir. Welcome to this CTQ Smartcast.
Hi, thanks for having me here. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Sudhir, this is going to be one of the most interesting smartcasts that I'm really looking forward to because this is the first time I'm talking to somebody who's come up with a completely different term, which is a take on the very well known systematic investment plan. But you call something as IIP. So,
Hi.
what is IIP all about? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I have been doing SIP for last 4 5 years, and I know the how that basically has a proper goal, and one looks to basically go to certain kind of a financial goal in life. And I was thinking about we all do that for money, but what do we do for our knowledge or our growth or our self development? And then I said, okay, people do sporadic efforts, but then do we do something structured? And then I was thinking about it, and then I thought about an idea that okay, I need to basically the way I put money aside for SIP, I need to really keep money aside for my IIP, that is intellectual investment plan. I said that's the kind of a commitment. So it's put your money where you want to really grow, and that put that money on table. So that's how I basically decided a basic sum to start with, or small sum, which I went on growing over a period of time. So I basically spend that money diligently every month. I buy books, I buy subscriptions, I basically support podcast, I support certain online websites. So I generally do all that. So that's basically the kind of structure, and I think that's the structure which has helped me. I started doing this couple of years back, and it has helped me pretty well in terms of doing structured effort to build knowledge and build as a person, become a better person.
This is fantastic, Sudhir, because this is perfectly in line with what we call as compounding. The reason why we call it CTQ compounds is that you do something small, you do something regular, and over a period of time, it compounds. So this is you're like our poster boy for CTQ compounds right now. Sudhir, as part of this IIP, what all do you do? You mentioned books and websites. How did you start these websites and which websites to follow, which courses to take up, and which books or which authors should support? This is almost like being a patron as it was back in the day where the Maharaja used to be the patron for the fine arts, right? This is something like that. So, how do you decide what to support?
So basically, I have my personal interest. So I am basically interested in history a bit. I am interested in economics, more so behavioral economics. That's something which interests me a lot. I like politics and society. So that's another area. And as I'm into business for last almost around 20 years, business management and work culture are the areas which are of interest to me. So I started with that. Basically, I started reading books very early. I came from Marathi background, but the schools, but then picked up on English and then picked up on management books way back. But that was not really happening in a structured format. Couple of years back, I started doing this seriously. Read quite a lot on politics, economy, on behavioral economics, multiple books. That was the first start. Then I got in hooked on to the Amit Verma podcast, the Seen and Unseen. That was another hook. And then the pandemic really helped because there are a lot of time available doing chores at home. What do you do with that? And then that complete voice in the head helped a lot. That also became a source for picking up good books because his notes are exhaustive. So these notes started coming almost way back after the 18th, 90th episode. Until then, there were no notes per se. But then this really helped well. Then I also do some subscriptions online. So listening to podcast is one, and then supporting those podcasts. I also listen to Econ Talk, which is Russ Roberts' very famous podcast. Amazing. A16Z, which is basically Anderson Horowitz podcast. That's interesting. Then because of Amit, then Shruti Rajgopalan's Ideas of India, and then Grand Tamasha by Milan Vaishnav. Those are interesting ones. I also listen to Knowledge Project by Shane Parrish. That's a good podcast. So these are the podcasts. Wherever there is a subscription, I pick up a subscription so that I get access to all the notes and the kind of community. But whenever it is not, then you just listen to them. So those are the ones which are basically from the podcast side. On the subscription side, New York Times, Washington Post, then HBR is one which is a subscription for almost now 3 4 years now. I also subscribe to Caravan. Caravan is one long form, fantastic investigative journalism. Their stories are amazing. I'll read to that. Atlantic, Guardian, New Yorker, these are another few. Wired, on Street, these are basically the US based. Then for business and startup and all, I read The Cane and the Morning Context, these two for business. I'm also basically, I try and understand what's happening onto the finance side of the world. So Capital Mind is another one that I read. So I also had paid subscription for a couple of years from them. So I was dabbling into a little bit of investments at that point of time. I did that. I also read Collaborative Fund and then Marginal Revolution and then MRU, which is the Marginal Revolution University. Spend time on that. So these are roughly the kind of too many things, but then I don't give justice to all of them. But then I have those subscriptions, and whenever, so I generally get things in inbox, and then if something is interesting, then I go and then read, and then maybe I'll read a couple more. That's how it happens. But these subscriptions, so there are different thought process there. I feel that if you don't keep them alive by subscription, they will not be alive. So I think you need to do it. Maybe you will use it once in a while, but then it is better to do subscription for these magazines or these websites, or maybe buy books than buy shoes that you won't wear or buy clothes that you won't wear, because as the pandemic has really shown, all the clothes are in the closet and not come out. So I think it is better to spend on these things. As you said, pattern is a big word, and those are Maharajas can use it, but in a small little way, what one can do, one should do, because I think attention span of people is going down, and with that, people are not really reading quite a lot that they should read. They even listening the way I'm talking about podcast? I'm not sure. I think very few people do that. So I feel that it is our duty to keep them alive. That's our kind of contribution for the future generation. So I have a 20-year-old son, and he reads quite a lot, but I don't see that happening much. And I feel that we need to do this. We need to keep these good magazines like Atlantic, New Yorker. Those are like huge, fantastic magazines, and they should remain alive. So subscription one must buy, definitely. That's the kind of a thought process.
Right. So there are many things for me to explore here, Sudhir. But one question that came to mind is when you talk about this, that this is almost like a moral responsibility to keep these things alive. That's for the greater good of the society. But is there something more selfish as well? How do you think about this in terms of your personal growth?
The journey is basically from the personal growth only, because the stories are amazing, the kind of knowledge that you get with them, the kind of clarity and multiple things. Means apart from these, one of the big impact on my learning for last 1 year has been your CTQ compounds, because that habit of reading I have. So I have to finish this before 10 o'clock. So I have 2 3 multiple timelines by which I try and finish things. So I generally, my first thing when 10 o'clock, whenever CTQ comes in, my thought process is first how many words. So if it is 1,000 words, then maybe I'll finish it immediately. But if it is 3,000 words, then maybe I'll do it at around 2 o'clock. So those kind of things. Here, the focus was always on personal growth. The focus was always on, I think, reading wide, reading different subjects, reading. So I'm not too much into technical. So I don't go too much technical, but I go something which is basically gives me a worldview of things, and all these magazines they give that, and then those help me connect the dots. So I think there is this good fantastic Amit on his podcast once had said that by reading more and more, basically you collect as many dots as possible, and that collecting dots will basically make your picture or worldview a high definition view. So you basically get more and more clarity. We basically are moving in life. When you are moving in business life, you're basically getting a 10 feet visibility maybe about future. Now by bringing these more and more dots, maybe you will get 20 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet. So that visibility, that clarity, that comes well. So the whole idea about reading more is about collecting as many dots as possible for personal development. That's the thought process. Yes.
Yeah. So you talk about collecting dots, and I think it's a big component of building future relevance. If you
So,
want to build future relevance for yourself, for your organization, A, you need to have curiosity. B, you need to make sure that you reduce the unknown unknowns as much as possible.
Absolutely.
You will never be able to eliminate it, but build this, keep building this, and it's a continuous process. So, with that in mind, do you also deliberately look at filling any gaps or holes in how your knowledge landscape is being constructed over a period of time? How is it evolving?
So basically, I look at it, our life as basically something which is external is the markets, the society that we live in, and the state that is there. So these three parts, that's one. Second is about knowing oneself, which also helps you know others around you. So these are the kind of areas that I want to understand more and more. The more I understand about society, the more I understand about people, the more I understand about markets, the more I understand about business, the more you understand about state, the more you understand about the power play, the more you understand about yourself, you understand your relationships, how you basically treat others, what's the kind of right way of living. Those kind of things basically give me a kind of a pick into my world around me, and helps me understand that world better. So, as you said, when we read a lot, we basically are trying to reduce the unknown unknowns. That's right. But also, the unknown will always remain. And how do you live with unknown? How do you live with that kind of ambiguity in life? I think that gray life is not black and white. So, how do you live with gray? So, I always keep, whenever we hire sales guy, we always look at whether that person can remain in gray, because when you are basically pitching for some order and then we are ultimately getting order, that entire period is gray. And how does one live in that gray peacefully is what matters. That makes a great sales guy. So I always see that as an quality that needs to be built in an individual. I always have been, over a period of time I have built, I can say that I can, whenever there is a ambiguity in the situation, I don't generally get, I let that ambiguity sink in and live with that ambiguity, and basically take life peacefully at that point of time. So I think how to live with these things is something which basically comes easily once you have that kind of understanding of the world around.
And Sudhir, you spoke about how this happened over the last 3 to 4 years. Was there a trigger for you when you said, "Oh, this is something missing in my life. I need to spend more time and effort in curating the kind of content that I'm consuming"? Was there a trigger, or it just evolved over a period of time?
No, I think there was a trigger. When I look back, I know. So around 2017, 2016, 2017, I sold off my company. And with that, and then couple of years of garden leave with the people who bought that company, I had a lot of time on hand.
Hmm.
So until then, I was building the company and I was like crazy working. Yes, I was reading, but that was not a priority. Suddenly, I saw that it's not there, and then there is a life, and I need to do something different. And what is that different? Gave me a lot of thought, and then that's how I got into thinking deeply about these things. I also looked at myself as a person. I said, okay, fine, my identity until then was that company's founder, owner, whatever, but today I am going to again get into start something new. And how do I start? What is that I will be looked at? What is that capital that I have now? So
Hmm.
that capital, earlier capital was different, this capital needs to be different. So with all those, I think, so that particular point, the sale of my company was a trigger which basically got me thinking, got me actually getting into this, not understanding and then improving myself. Because I said ultimately the investment in oneself now is going to take you forward in life, and that was a realization which basically brought me here.
So, two questions. I don't know how easy are they going to be to answer. One is, had this realization come earlier, do you think whatever you did with your earlier company and with your life in general would have been different?
Not really. I think what I did with my company, we were basically very committed. We were not a very big company, but we were a very good company in terms of what customer service, what products we built, what business we built, what service that we offered to people. The whole idea then was that make a company which, if tomorrow not there, people will miss it. That's
Hmm.
the simple line. That was
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
People should miss what you were doing. That's the whole thought process that we had, and we really did that. So that was something. I don't think I would have done something better. Maybe I really don't know. I never really, I think, dwell into it. But I think what we did then was okay. But whether I would, I really don't know. I think that's a question that I need to think about. Now that you have given me that, put that seed into my mind, I need to think about it. I think, yeah,
Right.
if I had known all this, would I have taken a different decision? Maybe would I have behaved differently? Would I have nurtured the company differently? I think something that is a food for thought. Yeah, I'll
Right.
I'll
Yeah,
ask you that.
and the second part of that question, Sudhir, was what advice would you give to others in terms of doing this more deliberately and starting earlier? Because this is a corollary to my first question, right?
Oh,
Because it is very easy to look at your story till now and say that okay, there needs to be a point where you get to a certain situation where you have been there, done that, sold a company, and now is the time to actually expand your horizons. So is that a view that you would subscribe to, that you need to get somewhere and then do this, or start earlier?
no, I think start earlier. Yeah, definitely start earlier. Definitely. See, the point is in company, I went on doing what I did. And suddenly we had two, three buyers who interested in the model that we had built. And then they gave us money, and that was for return that we got on the business side. But knowledge does not give you that kind of a return suddenly like that. So knowledge, you have to do compounding. There is no choice. There is no choice for knowledge. So what I did in the company for money cannot be replicated for knowledge. You have to do small a bit every day, every week, month, and you need to, then only you will have picture which is more. So it is not suddenly that you move from absolute no clarity to a great clarity. It's a journey which comes through, as you said, compounding knowledge. And I think yes, somebody would have met me 10 years back and explained this to me, or maybe I would have come across some interview like this, maybe I would have started much earlier. I would have started much earlier. Yes, I would have definitely started much earlier.
So, Sudhir, if you can talk about how this is helping, this whole change of mindset and change of philosophy, how is this helping you in your professional life today? How do you think that's contributing to that?
So I think quite a lot. My quality of decision making changes because suddenly you look at the same thing from multiple angles. And your conversations, whenever you are interacting with people of at basically a very deciding positions across table when you are doing business, your quality of interactions is very different because you're talking, you can basically engage others with different views because you have your worldview is much better with the kind of thought process that one has. So that's interesting part that has happened. With this knowledge, I also, one thing that I did was that I started basically writing a bit for myself. With this knowledge gathering that I did, I said, okay, I need to get certain clarity, so I started writing. And that writing basically has helped me internally on business. So on business side, whenever I come across some issue and I'm just talking and I'm just not clear, I go back and I write. So recently there's some disagreement that we had, and then I went back and I wrote a 1600 word essay. So and that kind of a thing happens because you have a structure much more, because with these you get a little bit of structure to your thoughts. You write them better, you write them more, and the structure comes much better. So I think on the business side, getting clarity of thoughts by writing on things, that has helped. I think with all this listening that I do, my interactions. So recent example, we are applying for a loan with the bank. It's a dollar loan, and we were talking to the bankers, and the bankers were talking about NPAs, and I could talk very comfortably with them on the whole idea of how the banks evolved. They were not the banks, PSP banks were not really banks, but they were social institutions, and how they were actually pushing the agenda of the government of taking the loans and all down the line to rural areas. And they also do Swachh Bharat Abhiyan on whenever the date is there. So they are social institutions. They are not really banking institutions. And how then the finance institution, the institutional finance institutions like IDBI and ICICI came into the retail banking, and how there was no project finance understanding with the banks, and that's the NPAs became mess. So when I was discussing this with banks, the banker got surprised that people have this kind of understanding. So now I don't know how it helps. Maybe it helps in creating that rapport, and then getting that loan passed is faster But then yes, that's an kind of a unseen advantage. But I think your interactions become better. You feel connected. Your engagement with people is better. So I think with these diverse thoughts that you bring in onto table, your decision making definitely improves and becomes much better. That's what I have seen very clearly. The quality of decision making is much different and much better.
Right.
That helps.
Yeah, yeah. So, Sudhir, you are talking about so many different sources of content. How do you manage the time? How does your day look like?
So I think I this goes back to my school. So when I was in school, I used to come first until sixth or seventh standard. Shifted to school, and then I had some competition. Then went to college, and much more competition. I saw smarter people around, and then over a period of time, I realized that I'm not the smartest guy the way I was thinking very early. So I said, okay, if you are not smartest, then the only way to beat the world is to be disciplined.
Hmm.
So I thought that yes, I need to move to that discipline side. So I move to that part. I generally avoid as much distractions as possible. I avoid distractions. That's so a deep work by Carl Newport, that book. So that's something which has helped. Atomic Habits, James Clear, that has helped. Those two books basically helped me a lot. I basically use those methods to get a lot of time available. So what I do is basically get have a routine of time. So get up early at around 5ish, finish my exercises, then have around 1.5 hour for reading, then start the work, then maybe around afternoon spend some time on reading. All my traveling is always with podcasts, so listen when you are traveling. Evening again around 8 to 9, 9 to 10 roughly around, get time for reading. So these are the things. I am not on Facebook. I am not on Instagram. So those are the distractions which are cut. Twitter, I used to have had a self-imposed limit of around 50 people to follow, which I have now relaxed because I wanted to get those advantages of serendipity. So I thought that I need to improve. So I almost around follow around 180, 90 people now. So that's Twitter is the place where I get content, great content. So I generally use that for collection of ideas, content from there. But no TV at all. I don't listen to news, so there is no TV, so there is no news at all. So those are the distractions which I have kept away. So I think you have so much time, and what do you do with that time matters. So I think the biggest point is distraction, removal of distraction. Also, there is a app which I use where we basically, the Threader app is there. So Threader app basically picks up all my threads onto the Twitter. I also use Readwise. So
Right.
Readwise is something which has helped a lot. What I do is that articles from CTQ, the books that I read, I generally take books on Kindle now, so that highlights are easy, and then highlights are pushed to Readwise. And then I every day morning at a fixed time. So once I finish my exercise, I get into stretching. So when I'm doing stretching, sitting and stretching, I have around 10 minutes of stretching. That time I basically go through my Readwise. So Readwise around 15 notes every day I go through. So it keeps on pushing the stuff that I have highlighted over a period of time. And the more frequent, less frequent, those kind of settings you can do. So Readwise has been one of the great help for that. Notion is where I take notes again. I mean, now I currently doing some work. I'm a member of Ascent Foundation, which is Harsh Mariwala kind of initiative. I'm doing some work there. I'm basically taking a class, a cryptocurrency class for people. So almost around 50 odd friends who are part of that. And while learning, I am teaching everybody on cryptocurrency. That will get over by around August 10. After that, I want to get into this productivity seriously. So so Obsidian is something that I have downloaded. I want to see how it basically helps. So knowledge management, whatever I'm reading, whatever I'm listening, I want to build notes around that. I want to build a kind of entire knowledge management project. So something I will do by this month, and once I'm through with my cryptocurrency class, that is the next project that I want to take. So these
Right.
are the things which basically I use to manage the knowledge.
And the teaching bit again triggered a question. So, has that been a very deliberate way of manifestation of your curiosity and learning? As Feynman says, the best way to learn something is to teach it. So was that a very deliberate attempt to learn to go and teach?
Absolutely. So I think that's the same again. Krish Ashok's podcast with he talked about the same thing, that teaching is the best way to retain knowledge. So basically, when cryptocurrency class, where people were wanting to know about cryptocurrency, and then they did not have anybody, then I said, okay, why not? Let me just take the lead. So I basically took the lead. So what I did was that I built that entire course into why, what, and how, and why cryptocurrency came into being, what is basically cryptocurrency in a real sense. So we broke that entire chapter, the course, into 3 months, and then I went on to, there's abundance, amazing kind of knowledge available on YouTube. So it is only YouTube, through YouTube videos we have built this entire thing, and I have to go through at least around 8 to 10 videos before I push one. So
Mhm.
that way it helped me, and then create a structure in the mind. And then also on the weekends, I, on the whatever videos are sent on the week, I do a small quiz for everybody. So
Mhm.
that, creating that quiz also basically helped in kind of retention of knowledge. So yes, the initiative that I took for teaching was basically for my own growth. I knew that is the best way to basically learn anything. So that's the reason I took it. Yeah.
Right. And you mentioned you've started following more people on Twitter to account for serendipity. So, again, has there been any other deliberate attempt to trigger serendipity, orchestrate serendipity?
This is what I'm that way, a bit of a introvert. I'm not a extrovert person, so this is something which I can remain in background and do. But I think what people can do basically is meet more people. I think that's something that one can do, which is what I want to do. But currently, with the pandemic and restrictions on going out, that's something which is not possible. Also, I think CityQ has been great platform for serendipity, because you don't know what's coming in today morning at 10, and it comes and you consume and you pick up so much from different places, means the kind of blogs which I have not heard of. So I think CityQ has been one of the fantastic example of getting that serendipity, absolute advantage of that. So that's really been very good.
All right. So, final question, Sudhir. What would you recommend to someone who is listening to you speak and gets really inspired, saying, "Wow, this is fantastic. I'm going to get started." But obviously, you can't put that person at the level that you are right now.
True, true,
So,
true.
how does that person get started?
No, I think one is, if you are wanting to get into reading, then maybe if you are not a really a reader, then start with fiction. So that's, I always, that's a gateway drug for reading. So you basically start reading fiction, pick up anything that you would like, start with that, and then move to areas. But I think biggest trouble or biggest problem that I see currently is time. So people
Hmm.
do not have time, and that time not being there is actually because of distraction. So I think I will recommend anybody read two books, Deep Work by Cal Newport and Atomic Habits by James Clear. I think these two would basically make concepts clear. And once those concepts are clear, then one can basically cut down the distractions. There are a lot of the tools available. So the focus tool that is available on the Apple ecosystem everywhere, and maybe I think on Android also there will be something like that. These tools help. So we basically keep distractions away, keep notifications away. So my WhatsApp, which is used for business, is on the third or fourth swipe. It's not on the first swipe ever. I don't put any notifications. I have my business mails are not on my phone. They are not at all. They are only on my desktop. They are not even on my iPad. So basically, these are these small hacks which one can use to keep the distractions away. The moment distractions are away, then you can basically spend time here. Then time is available with you, and with the time availability, then you need to just think about how can I feel best with good content, and that's how things would start. So I
Right.
think getting cutting your distractions is the first key. I think that's once you can do that, then the progress path is absolutely, I think, easier.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic, Sudhir. This is a great workable plan because you have actually spoken about how to hack away at this whole problem.
True.
Because, first you have to find time. If you don't find that time, then yeah, this is all great to hear, but how do you actually go ahead and implement it? And for finding time, I think you have to again think It's like those five whys. You're trying to figure out where is it that I can create that time in my schedule, and then once I have that time, then yes, now these are, you have given a bunch of resources. This is a great way to get started, and not just for people who are just getting started, but for even others who think they are much higher on that curve. There are some fantastic recommendations of sources of content. Thanks a lot for this.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it was great talking to you.